institution and also in tradition in the institution, now online for the first time, and as well marking the departure of my colleague Rabbi Shell. And to pay tribute both to Temple Israel and to Rabbi Shell, I'd like to speak now to you about leadership. We live in interesting times. A generation ago, there was a reluctance to endorse strong leaders. On the contrary, the feeling was that uncritical adherence of a leader correspond to a certain immaturity in a history of countries or societies. The 20th century had already borne witness to the calamities which such leaders could bring upon their people, humanity, and our environment. However, in the last decade or so, this trend had shifted. Today it seems that many people in many countries feel and enact a need for strong leaders, and their need is not left unfulfilled, but expresses itself in characters throughout those personalities who represent the political conditions in the various countries. These fundamental needs find its human embodiment, who in most cases, those leaders will reflect the basic fears and mindsets which initially brought them to power. Recent decades have seen the growth of new type of a leader all over the world, one whose spirit and actions derive from the forms of power exercised in the past. Power aligned with division, exploitation, hierarchy, and fear. This turn to reactionary leadership in many countries, the strength these leaders gain from a large support base, and the shift from, or at least the questioning of democratic values, all these trends are evident political processes which we must face. Rabbi Shel and I both belong to the generation which was shaped by the fall of the Soviet Union. We recall vividly how at Christmas 1989 in Berlin, our fellow Jew Leonard Bernstein conducted Beethoven's Ninth Symphony in such an electrifying manner. We grew up with the hopes of the early 90s and into realizations that followed. So to clarify, we understand that when we face political actualities, we are not merely bystanders. We are involved and committed players, doing our limited best to participate in the struggle of our times and to combine our efforts for the sake of our shared values, as well as that we hold to be true, dear, and trustworthy. Looking into the wisdom of our tradition, we can share with us on this matter what we find in Judaism, having been derived from a community of runaway slaves, is suspicious towards structures of power. The ancient Israelite idea is of a free nation which lives in accordance to the divine law. Why is it necessary for a change in this mode of governance to interrupt such harmony? Maybe because the actual state of affairs was always far from the ideal. The books of Judges and Samuel describe the transition from a tribal society into a kingdom. That process was neither easy nor smooth, and I'd like to highlight two moments in it. The first is when the people offered the crown to Gideon, the judge, and the Israelites said to Gideon, "Rule over us, you and your sons and grandsons, because you have saved us from the hands of Midian." But Gideon answered, "I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." That's in Judges 8. And the second moment comes when the people ask Samuel to set a king over them, to lead them. And Samuel answers, "This is what the king who will reign over you will claim as his rights. He will take your sons and make them serve him on his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of his chariots. And some he will assign to be commandments of thousands or of fifties, and others to plow his grounds and to reap his harvest, and still others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants. He will take a tenth of your grain and your vineyard and give it to his officials and attenders, your male and female servants, and the best of your cattle and donkeys he will take for his own. He will take a tenth of your flocks, and you yourself will become his slaves. And when that day comes, you will cry out for relief for the king you have chosen, but the Lord will not answer you on that day. That's 1 Samuel 8. These are two examples of an original Hebrew spirit, which demands both individuals and the community the maturity to follow the divine laws without the external enforcement of human regimes. Between these two examples lies a third one, Mashal Yotam, the parable of Yotam. And this story comes from the generation after Gideon. Yotam, he was the youngest son of Gideon out of 70 sons, and he escaped when the rest of his brothers were put to death by the order of the half-brother Avimelech, who strove for power, as described in Judges 9. When the people gathered to make Abimelech king by the plan of the pillar beside the stone set up in Shechem generations before by Joshua, then a voice was heard from the heights of Mount Gerizim, and it was Yotam protesting against what they were about to do through a parable, a story with a moral point, a story with an allegorical relation to reality. And this is the parable of the Bramble king, Ha'atad. Hearken to me, you men of Shechem, that God may hearken unto you. The trees went forth on a time to anoint a king over them. And they said unto the olive tree, reign over us. But the olive tree said to them, should I leave my oil, seeing that by me it honors God and man, and go to hold sway over the trees? And then the trees said to the fig tree, come you, and reign over us. But the fig tree said unto them, should I leave my sweetness and my good fruitage, and go to hold sway over the trees? And then the tree said unto the vine, come thou, and reign over us. And the vine said to them, should I leave my wine, which uplifts the spirit of God and men, and go hold sway over the trees? Then said all the trees unto the bramble, and the bramble, atad here is a generic name for any rough, tangled, prickly shrub, come down and reign over us. And the bramble said unto them, if in truth you anoint me as your king, then come and take refuge in my shadow, and if not, let the fire come out from the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. The bramble we are talking about, atad, is a fruitless, useless, thorny bush. It is also easily set fire to it. It is the allegory for those who force themselves into positions of leadership and end up burning the cedars of Lebanon, the most beautiful and majestic of trees. Being a rabbi means being ongoing on a leadership position, and ongoing being in the eye of the public for extended periods, maybe even for lifetime. Leaders must always question themselves regarding their motives and their integrity. A true leader is someone who encourages leadership and leaders around him or her, like the shamas on the Chanukiah, the Chanukah menorah. One must give from your own light to those who share the journey with you. So as I conclude, I'd like to thank you, Adrian, for your commitment to us and for being that sort of leader in your years here with us. For me, you've always been a comrade and a friend, and on behalf of our progressive movement and on behalf of our rabbinic association, I say warm farewell and wish you all the best. יברכך אדוני וישמרך, יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונך, יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום.